Anyway, we've probably got enough people to get started. Let me, can I get a volunteer to take some notes for us today?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you, Lawrence. Cool, so I'll start us off with a quick release check-in. So Calico 3.14 came out very recently. I think, what was the date on that? May 7th. So just the end of last week. There's a lot of cool stuff in that, but I'll just give a quick rundown. So a number of host endpoint improvements. I think we demoed automatic creation and management of host endpoints on the last meeting, and that's now released in 3.14. Kind of paired up with that were some enhancements to what we are calling wildcarded host endpoints, where a single host endpoint represents every interface on the host. So we kind of extended additional policy support to that, whereas previously only pre-DNAT policies applied. Now regular non-pre-DNAT, post-DNAT policies apply to that. I think one thing to call out on that, if you're planning to use it, is that we did make a change in the default behavior of these wildcarded host endpoints. So previously, if you created one, it would be default allow, and we switched that to default deny to be more consistent with other host endpoint types. And there are upgrade instructions in the docs for how to do that. So we've got a tech preview of node-to-node encryption using WireGuard, which we've got a demo of a little bit later in the call. So I'm pretty excited for that. And then just a whole ton of bug fixes and improvements to the eBPF data plane tech preview, which I won't go into detail because there's lots and lots of them, but if you have questions on that, happy to answer, or I know Sean's here who can also answer lots of those. So yeah, it was a really big release. A lot of people contributed to it. I'm super excited to see what kind of feedback we get on it. And I just wanted to give a big thanks to everybody involved. It was a very, very exciting release. Any questions or comments on that before I talk about the next release?
We had a demo of auto host endpoints on a previous call or anything, Casey? That's quite a cool feature. So
I think we did have a demo of that in a very early form on the last call. At least according to the notes.
I think Lawrence demoed it last meeting.
cool.
Yeah, that's right. It was a sorry. Yeah, it was kind of a quick demo. I didn't go over the policy changes, but mostly just kind of the UX of enabling and disabling it and kind of showing what it looked like.
It's a pretty cool feature, though. It's going to make it super easy for people to add that extra layer of security to their Kubernetes nodes.
Yeah, I agree.
I just dropped a link to that meeting in the chat, and I'll put it in the notes so that anybody who wants to find it can go take a look later on.
Thanks, Chris. So Calico 3.15 is the one that comes after Calico 3.14, and so that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. So it's still kind of early days. We're working through some of the scope and what we wanted to do in there. I know one thing, so you may have mentioned the encryption via WireGuard is currently as a tech preview to get some feedback on, and because of 1 or 2 known limitations of that, we're hoping in 3.15 to close those limitations and promote that to GA. So shout out to everybody to please give it a try, give it a spin, give us your feedback. Let us know what you think so we can incorporate that into the next release. We also have work in progress on the ability to switch a cluster using etcd directly to one that's using the Kubernetes API via CRDs to store its state. That's probably a stretch for 3.15, but if it doesn't make that, it'll be 3.16. So those are kind of the 2 big ones on the list right now. I know we're also talking about a couple other minor enhancements around host endpoints, like additional selectors to make selecting them easier and things like that. But like I said, still kind of early days, so happy to hear what other people think about what might be a good thing to put into that as well.
It's the host endpoint thing basically to enable you to define policy that will allow you to allow ingress from external entities that aren't hosts. Is that sort of thing? Or because right now it'd be hard to write a policy that would allow access to the Kube API server, but not to everything else.
Yeah, so kind of the collection of features is meant to help with that. The one thing I was specifically talking to is there's not an easy way right now to say, like, I want this to apply only to hosts and not also to pods, for example, that might happen to have the same label. So a more concrete way to differentiate between the 2.
Makes sense. That's a cool feature.
So we've had host endpoint support for a very long time, but this is kind of this set of features. We're trying to make it more ergonomic, so you can create a host endpoint that's a wildcard for your whole host instead of having to individually create them for ETH0, ETH1, and so on. And it also, the wildcard aspect also addresses the case where you're trying to secure traffic, secure the host against the workloads that are on the host. So if a workload wants to talk to the host, this wildcard policy applies on that path as well, which is previously there was no way to do that until we added the wildcarded host endpoint support. Wildcarded host endpoints have been in a while, but the automatic creation of them makes it all a lot easier to use.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Sean.
So I think we should consider making 3.15 a point release of 3.14, and then we can have 3.1415 as a proper point release. If only we'd have aligned it with the right date as well.
Well done.
Yeah, I guess we're a little bit late to really do that properly.
We're definitely going to have a 3.14.1 at some point, guaranteed.
I'm sure we can find enough patch release worthy enhancements to get up to 1.5. So that's all I had for Calico 3.15. I think, Turk, you wanted to talk a little bit about some recent docs website enhancements.
Yeah, Turk wasn't able to make it to the meeting today. So I don't.
About it then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been doing one of the challenges that we've had with with the Calico docs and Google search interaction is we maintain all our old docs, so they're all still available for every version going back to something like 1.5, which there's like 4 or 5 years of docs history there if you really need to get to it. But the challenge we're finding is that for most users, when they type in something into Google search, they were not ending up on a useful version of the docs. It was a fairly random version you'd end up on. So we've reorganized the way we're doing the archiving of those docs, so they're kind of squirreled away to a separate section, and any Google search results should now get redirected to the latest version of a doc. So we've done like the major work there, and now we're kind of monitoring it to catch all the exceptions that our algorithm and changes may have missed. So if anybody encounters doing a Google search and ending up on a useless Calico doc, then drop us a Slack or something to let us know, or raise a GitHub issue, and we can fix it.
I can say that empirically, I've already noticed this change, and it's definitely an improvement.
It's awesome.
Yay.
That is awesome to hear.
Wanted to do that for so long.
Yeah, I've noticed it too. Yeah, I think it's been a really fantastic improvement across a lot of different ways. So yeah, so I'm glad it went in.
I'm glad the first comment was positive, because we're kind of wondering if it could go either way, because it could be like, oh, but I've got permalinks to all those old URLs, and I'm using those, and there's 2 or 3 people who come out of the woodwork who are like, but I was generating URLs for old release notes and packaging those with whatever, and yeah, but glad it was positive.
All right, so let's talk about some hot issues. So this is just a good chance for anybody to raise to our attention any issues that we may or may not be aware of, and just kind of get the community's input or attention on them. So anybody can feel free to shout out. I have one update, but I will give a few moments before I talk about it. Okay, so last time I talked about this Typha issue that we saw, where someone in the community had raised an issue that Typha was performing too many GET requests against the Kubernetes API server when it should be using kind of long-lived watches to avoid that. And at the time, we had just been starting the investigation into what was going on there, because we weren't sure what that was. And so the update is that we now know what's going on. There are 2 places that we were doing gets kind of unnecessarily. One, when using host local IPAM, we hadn't properly implemented the code to convert the node pod CIDR fields on the Kubernetes node objects, which is where the host local IPAM gets its subnet information from, to the sort of internal data structures that that Felix uses. And so Felix and PGP. So we were doing lots of lists in order to get those instead of watches. A fix for that has gone in just as of this week. And then there was a second instance in Typha itself where, and I think this is the less serious of the 2 because it's much less frequent, but where Typha uses the node count to kind of determine how many connections it should be rebalancing to other Taifas. And so it was doing list lookups of nodes rather than driving that calculation off of the watch. So there's a PR up right now to fix that. Yeah, so I just wanted to give that quick update. That's excited to get those in because it should be a nice little performance improvement against the API server.
Like the first one didn't make it to 3.14, right? It'd be a 3.14.1 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So that one will need to go into a patch release.
3.14, 3.1415.
Could be. We just have to find 14 more issues that we can fix. Yeah, so I'm in the process of rolling that out to all the master repos right now, and then once that's done, I'll backport it to 3.14. That was the only hot issue I had. So if there's nothing more, we can move on to Calico Heroes. Give some shout outs to heroes in the community.
Yeah, so I'll start. I wanted to give a shout out to Jessica Deen, who is a developer advocate at Microsoft for Azure, who put together a really nice video about how to set up network policies on Azure with Calico and how to use them. I will post a link to the video. Yeah, it's really good. It's really well done. You know, and I thought it was great that, you know, a member of our community went out and did this and published it, and, you know, kind of like introduced a wider audience to Calico. I invited her to the meeting, but it doesn't look like she was able to make it. But yeah, if you have a chance, go check out the video on her Twitter feed too. She's pretty cool. The other person that I wanted to shout out was Reza, who is one of the students who's helping out, you know, test out some of our on-ramps and some of our usability things. Reza has put in a lot of work to document how to use and build dashboards for our metrics integrations, and so he sent in a pull request that kind of walks people through how to set up Prometheus, and also has a pull request in place for setting up a Grafana dashboard. So, and Reza is at the meeting, so everyone say hello to Reza and thank you for your work and the improvements to the docs.
I'd like. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, do you want to say hi, Reza?
Reza. Hi, Reza.
Yeah, sure.
So I'd like to give a shout out to Richard Kovacs. So he's done a couple of things. He started a new operator to scale route reflectors, which is really cool. And I'll post a link into the doc in just a second. The other thing is he volunteered to take on updating the Calico the hard way tutorial to use a newer version of Calico, which is really awesome because you know, it's one of those things where you really just got to go through the tutorial and make sure that everything still kind of works and makes sense. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, this is Brad. I'd like to give a shout out. It doesn't look like Erik at Stidham, or I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce the last name, but Erik's been helping us out as we've moved to the Calico operator for OpenShift 4. just been really responsive, responding to a lot of questions we've had, and also ideas we've had, feature requests we've had. So really appreciate his help on that. So.
Yeah, I think Garrick was hoping to be here, but got pulled into another meeting.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. It's really awesome to see all the cool things that are going on out there in the Calico world. Any other last minute mentions before move
Give
on?
a shout out to Nirman, who's on the call. He put up a PR to improve the S390X support. Well, to add S390X support to Calico Go build. So I think he's got some Q&A for us in a minute.
Nice.
Yeah, nice, S390.
Cool. So with that, I'll hand it over to Gaurav, who's got a quick demo of the new encryption support in 3.14.
Morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Thank you. Okay, I'll share my screen real quick. Did you see? All right. So before I start, I'll just give a brief overview of what this feature is about. What we've done in 3.14 is add support for node-to-node encryption. So the traffic between the nodes will actually go over secure tunnels. And for these secure tunnels, we are using WireGuard. WireGuard, I'm guessing most of you already know, but if you don't know, WireGuard is a VPN solution. It uses a specific set of cryptographic primitives to secure tunnels. It's relatively fast. Despite the completely software-only solution, and it's been formally verified, the security of WireGuard. So it's a pretty good solution for using a secure tunnel, and which is one of the reasons we went with this. So I'll just start with what I have. So for this demo, I prepared a 2-node cluster. So for the sake of saving time, I made sure and enabled, or rather installed the WireGuard on both the nodes. So when I install the WireGuard node, it comes with a utility called as WG, which is not showing you anything right now. And once we enable WireGuard on Calico, you'll see some changes there, and we'll go through those as we move along. So the first step you need to do is enable WireGuard, and you need to use Calico Cutter to do that. What you do is basically, I want to enable WireGuard across all my nodes, so I'm going to modify my default Helix configuration and patch it with WireGuard enabled, set it true. Once I do that, let's go back and see what has changed here. Now, when you enable WireGuard, what you'll notice on each node is a new interface being created. The interface is the default name of the interface is WireGuard.cali, and this is actually an interface of type WireGuard. If you have WireGuard enabled or installed on your nodes, you will actually see this device being created. If the WireGuard type interface, WireGuard is not installed, you will not be, this interface will not be created, which means WireGuard tunnel will not be established with this particular node. And if you look at the Calico, Calico node logs, you will notice that it will spit out an error saying that WireGuard not supported. So we have the WireGuard setup. Now, as part of WireGuard setup, we also set up the public key on both the nodes. And once the public key is set up, there is an exchange and the tunnels are being established. So when we looked at, before enabling WireGuard, when we looked at the WG output, we actually didn't see anything because there was no tunnel established, the node was not prepped for WireGuard. But if you were to look at now, you'll notice that there is the interface has been set up and there's a public key generated for that interface. And what you see in this peer section is the public key of the other node. When I'm looking at node 0, it's the public key of node 1, and when I'm looking at node 1, it's public key of node 0. What this basically signifies is a secure tunnel established between these two nodes. So
that key was automatically generated, right?
Sorry, Sean, what was the question, Sean?
The where did the key come from? Was it generated?
It is automatically generated. Yeah. These keys, right? Yeah, these are automatically generated, and we do it as part of enabling WireGuard. So this basically signifies what you're seeing right now is there's a tunnel established. There's still no traffic going through it, and I'll give you a quick demo once we do that, what happens. So for this demo, I've created a namespace demo, and I'm going to create 2 different pods. The pods I'm going to create will be on each node. So you can see traffic going from one node to the other. So even now, there is no tunnel established. What we will do is I'll just log in, I'll just create an exec shell session to one of the pods, and I'll ping the pod on the other node. This will basically automatically create the tunnel, and you'll start seeing the traffic being exchanged. Now, this traffic is actually being, the ICMP traffic is actually being exchanged over the secure tunnel. The numbers have, you see the transfer data has improved now that I've stopped traffic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, if you disable the device, obviously I'll quickly show you. Now that the WireGuard is disabled, there's no WireGuard Cali device anymore.
Is this just pod traffic, or is this going to handle all Calico traffic back and forth between the nodes? Like, are you also is this also going to pick up the BGP peering traffic?
It's currently only doing pod-to-pod traffic.
Okay.
And Casey already mentioned it, but this is a tech preview. So we would love if you guys can try this and give us feedback on how we can improve it, or if this can be simplified further. That's all I had. If I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you, Gareth.
Excellent.
Any other questions or thoughts for Gareth?
What's the environment you're using to test there? Are you using actual machines in a lab somewhere or something like that?
These are VMs, the setup I showed you.
Okay. I was thinking about maybe setting up like, I know that WeWorks Footloose has the ability to use Firecracker as a virtualization layer, and you can also use Ansible to configure that stuff. So maybe I'll set up like a little environment where people can actually practice it.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I have to say this is really cool. I like the simplicity of it. I do have a few questions, just my lack of knowledge of WireGuard. I know it's included in the newest Linux kernel, is that right?
Finally.
That is correct.
Years.
But then, so if I wanted to use an older kernel, is there a way to install into other kernels?
Yeah, so in older kernels, we're actually using DKMS to set up these WireGuard modules. If you go to wireguard.com/install, it actually talks about how to do that for individual operating systems. So the OS that I had was Ubuntu, and all I needed to do was add the repos, the package repository, and just download it from there.
Okay, great. And the other question I had, does this encrypt pod-to-pod traffic that's on the same node, or only ones that go across the network?
No, so the kernels are actually between nodes. If it is on the same node, it's basically using the stack on the same machine.
Okay, all right.
I will say that this is a frequently asked for question. In fact, I see this happening in the community quite frequently. And people are conflating solving this problem with installing stuff like a service mesh, right? Because they're like, well, we get end-to-end encryption when we have a service mesh. I'm like, this is a lower level problem than that. You don't, I mean, like most of the time, what people are trying to do is check the box of I have encryption between all the things. And if they're taking on the complexity of Istio to solve that problem, then it makes me nuts. So I'm really, really glad to see this. So great job.
I think we did look at putting the WireGuard tunnels inside pods, but it makes it really hard to do policy if the host can't actually like see the source port or the desk port, then you can't block based on the source port and the desk port. So there might be some variation of that might happen later, but it's tricky to apply policy when you've already encrypted the traffic.
You do make an interesting point. Like, how do you troubleshoot the path here? Like, are you just, I guess you would use the WG command to see the peers, but how would you understand that traffic was actually still, like at what point are we applying the IP and IP encapsulation at that point? Are we doing it before it hits the WireGuard interface? Is the WireGuard interface the last hop? Or does it happen before IP and IP?
I think it's independent, right?
It's got to be.
WireGuard replaces IP here. So WireGuard is the tunnel.
Yep, that's right. And you can TCP dump on the WireGuard interface. It's see unencrypted traffic at that point.
So at that point, so that's confusing because in the demonstration just now, you were looking at, we could see that IP and IP encapsulation was still enabled. You could still see the tunnel interfaces, even though WireGuard was also configured.
Yeah, so at the moment with this release, it's the use of both kind of WireGuard and IP/IP are kind of not actually really working together properly. However, what we'll do for the future release is if you've got mixed clusters of some nodes supporting WireGuard and some not, traffic between to or from nodes that don't support WireGuard will fall back to the kind of other configured routing mechanism, so IP/IP or VXLAN. Otherwise, the WireGuard will take precedence.
Very cool.
At least that's current thoughts.
Awesome, great. Any other questions, or we can kind of transition into more general questions as well. Not that you can't ask any more WireGuard questions. I see a few there in the in the notes. So I can read those out. First question is, when can we expect Go build S390X images to be released? Yeah, we should probably do that now that it's merged.
Hi, Keshe, Nirman here.
Hey, Nirman.
Yeah, so this is my first time I've been attending this community call. Hi, hello to everyone. So currently I'm handling the process for pushing the changes related to support S390X for Calico. And this is the first PR which we have done for Go build. We tried the same thing last year also, but somehow the cross compilation for S390X failed because of the KMO issue. Now we have upgraded the KMO to version 4.2.0. But I can see in the master branch and the other branches, the KMO version which is being used is 2.9.1. So probably by upgrading the KMO, the cross compilation for S390X will be resolved. We have tested it on our systems, and I think Sean has been looking into it by testing out, by pushing the Go build image to Docker Hub.
Yeah, so I did a build of your branch by copying it into our own repo so that it did an automatic build. So I guess the next question is, like, are you working on sort of making S390X work with all of our components? Is that what you're working on? So
yeah.
Do you know, have you done test builds of the other components with your updated Go build?
Yeah.
Cool. And that's,
so
and
we
that's
have been testing. Yeah. So, but we are still waiting actually, because all the modules are using makefile.common file to get the architectures to build the other modules. And we are doing it currently manually, and we like to have that. We have the Go build image tagged for S390X soon, so that the same can be used in other modules also.
So there is, I think there should be a tagged image with the name of the branch that I pushed it with. So that should let us unblock the next stage of testing. Are you on our Calico users Slack? That's a good way to reach me, and I can help you get that over the line. Lost your audio, I think.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. So I went to the document for contributing, and so I had a question whether I need to push the changes to the release branch by cherry picking these commits, or whether these will be done by you guys only.
So I don't know. Do we? If we want to add support for S390X back to older releases, then we would need to cherry pick those. I'm not sure if that would be too disruptive, because it would change the whole build stack that we were using for old releases. So I think we might need to think about that. But we could possibly do it for one or two releases. I think we would have to ask you to put up the PRs to help that along. Since it's nice, I think S390X is a nice thing for us to have, but there's not like a main driver for my team to be adding it themselves. So if you want to provide that, then that's great.
Okay, thanks.
So we definitely talk about which releases we can accept it into and stuff, and make sure that you don't do work that we couldn't accept. Just from a point of view of if we swap out the whole build stack for an older release, then that might invalidate our testing. So we need to worry about that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So one last question which I had is, like, there are many changes which we want to push in for the other modules of Calico, but they won't be tested in the CI because makefile.common will not be fetched from the tagged go build. So shall I still go on pushing changes for SC90X, or shall I wait for go build SC90X image to be tagged first?
Let's tag a new image. That's quite a simple and quick process. So we can tag a new image of the build container fairly easily, and then you'll have a tagged makefile common and a tag, like you'll have a tag for everything. And then when you put up the PR, it will be complete. So it will rev to the new version of Go Build. It will pull the new makefile common, and then we don't change any of the downstream repos until all of those things are in line, which is quite nice.
Okay, got it.
So
Thanks, Sean.
Another change I'd quite like to make to Go Build is I'd like to rev it to Go 114. So that was on my list of things to do in the next few days, because we've just made a release. So I want to pull in the new version of Go so that the next release will be based on Go 114 instead of 113. I think that'd be a good thing to do.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Problem.
Have we seen if Go 114 fixes that Go sum updating issue that has followed us along for several releases now?
There's some hint that it has some improvements.
Nice.
But we're not sure.
Any other questions or comment or general banter? If not,
I just want to
then
thank all the people who've contributed again.
Yeah.
It really makes a big difference to what we can get done as a group. The more people are helping in, even if your contribution seems relatively small, it definitely helps.
yeah, I was pretty wowed just looking over all the changes in 3.14 and seeing all the people who had put into it, and also things that aren't directly in a release. Like there's lots and lots of stuff that's not a commit to the code that people help with digging into issues and helping on Slack and GitHub issues and all of that.
Yeah, we've got the other thing is we like to send out little swag packages to folks. Obviously, with the shelter in place, none of us are able to get to any of that swag and send you any of it out. So at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll start sending out some little thank yous to people who've been contributing.
Great. Well, we do this the second Wednesday of every month, if I recall correctly. So I think our next meeting will be June 10th. Thanks everybody for coming, and see you on the internet.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See you guys.